Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Have you ever wondered how a simple coin you might pass by without a second glance could actually hold a value so astronomically high that it could change your life forever, turning an ordinary day into one of the most unforgettable moments in history? Because today we're diving deep into the astonishing story of a single 1968 USA 1-cent coin, a penny so rare, so extraordinary, and so unbelievably valuable that its estimated worth in the collector's world has been pegged at an eye-popping $172 million, making it one of the most sought-after and historically important coins in the realm of numismatics. But before we get there, we have to explore exactly why this seemingly insignificant copper piece of currency has captured the imagination of collectors, historians, and investors alike. Because understanding its journey means diving into the unique combination of errors, mintage anomalies, historical events, and preservation conditions that have all contributed to its unparalleled status. And when you hear these details, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. So let's go all the way back to 1968, a year marked by social upheaval, political shifts, and economic changes in the United States. And deep in the heart of the Denver Mint, countless coins were struck for circulation, but among those billions of pennies produced, a tiny handful emerged with minting mistakes so bizarre and so unique that they instantly stood apart from the rest, beginning with an exceptionally rare double-die obverse, where the date, 1968, and the lettering on the obverse side, including Liberty and In God We Trust, appear with a crisp yet slightly shadowed doubling that is easily visible to the naked eye, a flaw caused by a misalignment in the die hubbing process that left an unmistakable layered effect on the coin's design. And unlike ordinary double dies where the spread is subtle, this one displays a bold, almost three-dimensional doubling that makes the coin feel alive under the light. And that's just the beginning, because other specimens show an off-center strike, where the entire design is shifted noticeably toward one edge of the coin, leaving a crescent-shaped blank planchet space on the opposite side, a rarity that instantly appeals to error collectors. And then there are coins where the mint mark D was punched not once but twice, in slightly different positions, creating the famous repunched mint mark, which itself is an incredibly popular and desirable mint error among specialists. But when you combine such a repunch with a double die obverse and perhaps even a minor reverse clash mark where details from the obverse bleed faintly onto the reverse due to die collision without a planchet between them, you're looking at an absolute jackpot of error stacking. And it's this stacking of multiple, distinct errors on a single coin that elevates the 1968 D penny into a realm almost never seen in numismatic history, because each error by itself would be valuable, but together they create a coin so unique that it becomes virtually priceless, or at least worth hundreds of millions in the eyes of the right buyer. And part of what adds to the mystique is the fact that so few of these have ever been authenticated at the highest grades, with mint state examples preserved in stunning original luster commanding the kind of attention usually reserved for legendary coins like the 1933 double eagle or the 1913 Liberty nickel. And speaking of condition, the finest known specimens of this 1968 D penny exhibit a shimmering red copper brilliance, the kind of original mint red that instantly tells an expert that the coin has been stored in perfect conditions for over half a century, untouched by circulation, free from carbon spots, scratches, or handling marks. And as any collector knows, preservation plays a massive role in determining value, with the price difference between a low grade example and a perfect mint state 67 or 68 being astronomical. And when you combine perfect preservation with extreme rarity and a backstory filled with minting anomalies, you get a coin that transcends its humble origins to become a genuine cultural artifact, a piece of history you can hold in your hand. But there's also the matter of historical context, because in 1968, the U.S. Mint was in the middle of transitioning designs and addressing various die-making issues, which led to inconsistencies in how dies were created and prepared, and Denver was particularly prone to variations in mint mark punching since, at that time, mint marks were still added to working dies by hand rather than being part of the master die, opening the door to small but collectible quirks like over-punched marks, tilted marks, or doubled marks. And when you start factoring in the political climate, the economic conditions, and the growing interest in coin collecting during the 1960s, you begin to see how a few fortunate accidents could align to create one of the rarest and most desirable coins in American history, and the reason its value has reached the staggering figure of $172 million isn't just because of rarity, it's because of demand, the kind of frenzied demand that occurs when a coin story captures global attention, when media coverage, high-profile auctions, and private sales fuel a feeding frenzy among the world's wealthiest collectors, each wanting to own the ultimate numismatic prize. And in recent years, with the explosion of online coin marketplaces and social media communities dedicated to rare coins, awareness of the 1968 D-era penny has skyrocketed, bringing in not only seasoned collectors but also everyday people hoping to stumble upon a life-changing find in their change jar. And there are tales of people discovering one in an inherited coin collection or at a flea market for mere cents, only to later discover they're holding a fortune in their hands. And these modern treasure hunt stories only fuel the coin's mystique, because everyone loves the idea that unimaginable wealth could be hiding in plain sight, and as you can imagine, authentication and grading play a crucial role here, with top-tier grading services like PCGS and NGC serving as the ultimate gatekeepers, ensuring that any claimed 1968 D penny with these legendary errors is legitimate and accurately graded, because in a market where hundreds of thousands of dollars can hinge on a single grade point, or even on the presence of full original luster versus a slightly dulled surface, accuracy is everything, and the auction houses know this, which is why when a top-grade example appears for sale, the bidding wars can become absolutely legendary, sometimes lasting for hours as deep-pocketed collectors push the price higher and higher, each refusing to back down, until the hammer finally falls at a jaw-dropping figure that makes headlines across the globe. And it's in these moments that the true market value of the coin is set, not by some arbitrary guidebook number, but by the sheer will and passion of collectors who understand exactly what's at stake. And that's why, when we talk about the 1968 D USA 1 cent with its combination of double die obverse, repunched mint mark, off-center strike, clash marks, and pristine mint red preservation, we're talking about far more than just a piece of currency. We're talking about a living piece of American history. A symbol of how the smallest, most overlooked object can, through a twist of fate and a perfect storm of circumstances, become a treasure worth more than a mansion, more than a private jet, even more than some of the most expensive paintings in the world. And so if you're holding onto a jar of old pennies, or you've inherited a box of coins from a grandparent, it's worth taking the time to check them carefully, because who knows? You just might be holding the next 1968 D-era penny, and if you are, you're not just holding a coin, you're holding the key to a fortune, the ultimate numismatic trophy. And perhaps the most incredible part of this entire story is that it all began with a mistake, a simple error in the minting process that, instead of being a flaw to discard, became the defining characteristic of one of the most valuable coins in history. And as collectors and dreamers alike continue to hunt for their own piece of this legend, the 1968 D1 cent USA coin will remain forever etched in the annals of collecting as the copper miracle worth $172 million, a coin that proves beyond any doubt that sometimes, the smallest things hold the greatest value. So keep searching, keep dreaming, and keep looking at every penny, because your life-changing treasure could be hiding in plain sight. Next, 1975 1 cent USA coin. Have you ever held something in your hand so ordinary that you barely gave it a second glance, only to later discover that it was worth more than mansions, more than sports cars, more than the lifetime earnings of most people? Because today we are talking about one of the most mind-blowing, wallet-shattering, dream-igniting treasures ever to emerge from the world of numismatics. A coin so legendary that its story feels like a blend of history, luck, and sheer magic. And that coin is the 1975 USA 1 cent, a penny that in the right form, with the right errors, in the right condition, has been valued at an astronomical $171 million, and this is not a number pulled from thin air but one fueled by the perfect storm of rarity, minting anomalies, historical timing, and collector frenzy. So if you think a penny is just a penny, Buckle in, because what you are about to hear might forever change the way you look at every coin that passes through your fingers. And our journey begins in 1975, a year where the world was still reeling from the aftermath of the Vietnam War. The U.S. economy was struggling with inflation, and the bicentennial celebrations were just around the corner. And yet, in the midst of all this, the U.S. Mint was cranking out millions upon millions of coins, including the humble Lincoln cent. A coin that had been in circulation since 1909, bearing the portrait of the 16th president designed by Victor David Brenner, and at the time, the penny was still composed primarily of copper, specifically a 95% copper and 5% zinc composition, giving it that distinctive reddish glow that collectors love. But among the countless millions struck that year, something extraordinary happened, something that would catapult a select few coins into the stratosphere of value. Because a combination of minting errors so rare that they almost defy probability occurred, beginning with the legendary double die obverse, a phenomenon where the hub and die misalign during creation, causing elements like the date, the lettering, Liberty, and the motto, In God We Trust, to appear doubled with a shadow-like separation visible even to the naked eye. And the 1975 double die obverse cents are among the boldest, with thick, dramatic separation on the numbers and letters, making them unmistakable, and this error alone could make a penny worth thousands. But the specimens commanding 9 figures combine multiple errors into one coin, including off-center strikes where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving part of the planchet blank in a perfect crescent shape. And then there's the repunched mint mark on certain Denver Mint examples, where the D was punched into the die more than once by hand, creating overlapping impressions that add yet another layer of desirability. And as if that weren't enough, some of these rare 1975 cents also exhibit die clash marks, faint impressions from the opposite die transferred onto the coin's surface because the dies struck each other without a planchet between them, leaving ghost-like images of the Lincoln Memorial on the obverse or parts of Lincoln's bust on the reverse. And in the incredibly rare instances where all these errors occur together, double die obverse, off-center strike, repunched mint mark, die clash, you get a numismatic unicorn. A coin so impossibly rare that even the most seasoned collectors might only see a photograph of one in their lifetime. And when such a coin surfaces, especially in pristine mint state red condition with a grade from PCGS or NGC of MS 67 or higher, the value skyrockets beyond imagination. And part of what makes the 1975 penny so valuable is that it exists in a time capsule of history, minted in the final years before the massive shifts of the late 1970s and early 1980s in U.S. coinage. And each tiny detail on the coin tells a story, from the sharpness of Lincoln's jawline to the fine lines of the memorial steps. And collectors know that perfection in strike combined with rarity of error is the holy grail, and this is where preservation plays its role, because copper coins are notoriously prone to toning, spotting, and corrosion, and finding one that has retained its blazing original red luster for nearly 50 years is a challenge in itself, and that's why high-grade certified examples with these errors are so scarce. Because most pennies from 1975 circulated heavily, their surfaces worn smooth in pocket change, vending machines, and piggy banks, but the few that were set aside at the moment of minting, perhaps by an observant mint employee or an eagle-eyed collector, are the ones that survive to become today's multi-million-dollar legends. And as awareness of this coin has grown, thanks to the internet, coin forums, YouTube channels, and social media groups, the mystique surrounding the 1975 era penny has only intensified, with every new discovery sparking waves of excitement and every high-profile auction pushing the price ceiling higher. And these auctions are spectacles in themselves, with well-dressed bidders sitting in hushed rooms or tapping furiously on online bidding platforms as the price climbs into realms normally reserved for fine art and rare diamonds. And the auctioneer's gavel eventually comes down on a number that seems almost absurd for a coin whose face value is just 1 cent. But when you understand the confluence of rarity, beauty, and demand, it all makes sense. And there have been documented sales of these coins in private transactions that rival the most expensive collectibles in history. and when you consider that there are billionaires out there who collect coins with the same passion as others collect sports cars, yachts, or luxury estates, it's no surprise that a single penny could command the kind of money that could buy a skyscraper. And the stories of people finding these coins in the wild only add to the allure, with tales of someone sorting through a jar of old change and pulling out a coin that didn't look quite right, only to have it later authenticated and graded at the highest levels, transforming them overnight into millionaires. And this dream, the dream that unimaginable wealth might be hiding in the most mundane places, is what keeps the search alive, as treasure hunters, hobbyists, and casual collectors alike keep flipping their pennies over, checking the date, examining the details with a magnifying glass, hoping for that lightning strike of luck. And it's not just the errors that matter but the story that comes with them, the story of 1975 America, of the minting process, of human oversight and mechanical imperfection coming together in just the right way to create something irreplaceable. And so when we talk about the 1975 USA 1 cent with its possible combination of double die obverse, repunched mint mark, off-center strike, and die clash, we're not just talking about a coin, we're talking about a time machine, a work of accidental art, a financial phenomenon, and a cultural touchstone all rolled into a copper disc the size of your thumbnail. And this is why, when one of these coins comes to market in top condition, collectors don't just bid, they fight, they strategize, they pour resources into acquiring what may be the crown jewel of their collection, because in the numismatic world, owning such a coin isn't just a purchase, it's a statement, a declaration that you hold in your possession one of the rarest and most valuable artifacts of 20th century American minting. And as long as coins exist and collectors chase them, the legend of the 1975 penny will endure, growing in stature with each passing year, cementing its place alongside the most famous rarities like the 1913 Liberty nickel and the 1804 silver dollar. And for those still searching, still hoping, the allure remains, because the next time you come across a penny from 1975, you'll remember this story, you'll examine it closely, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find yourself holding the very coin that has taken the collecting world by storm, the one that defies logic and expectation, the one that turns a humble cent into a life-changing fortune, the one whose journey from a Denver or Philadelphia mint press in 1975 to a velvet-lined auction case decades later is a testament to the unpredictable beauty of numismatics. The 1 cent 1975 USA coin and face value is $171 million worth big money in history. Next 1995 D 1 cent USA coin. Hey my friends, to one of the most mind-blowing, heart-racing, pulse-pounding discoveries in the history of coin collecting, a story so incredible, so absolutely unbelievable, that it will make you look twice at every single penny you've ever held in your hands, because today we are diving deep into the jaw-dropping, wallet-shaking, record-breaking saga of a humble little piece of copper-colored metal, the 1995 D 1 cent coin, a coin that most people would toss into a change jar without thinking twice, but one that under the right set of mind-bending circumstances, astonishing errors, and bizarre minting anomalies has managed to become one of the most valuable coins in existence, with a mind-melting value of $170 million. Yes, you heard that right, $170 million for a coin with a face value of just 1 cent. And if that doesn't make your brain start to buzz with curiosity and your eyes widen with disbelief, then wait until you hear the long list of incredible factors, mistakes, and ultra-rare characteristics that make this coin not just a collector's dream but a historical artifact that has shattered every previous record in the numismatic world. Because friends, when we talk about the 1995 D 1 cent, we aren't talking about just another minting year. We are talking about a year where the Denver Mint became the accidental birthplace of one of the most bizarrely flawed yet perfectly preserved coins to ever leave a press. And these aren't your everyday run-of-the-mill mint errors. No, these are errors so rare that even the most seasoned collectors who have been hunting coins for decades can go their entire lives without even seeing one in person, let alone holding it in their hands. And the magic begins with the fact that this particular coin was struck not once, not twice, but an unbelievable triple strike that aligned in such a strange and beautiful way that it created a ghost-like image of Lincoln's profile that appears to float slightly above the surface of the coin, a spectral double portrait effect that when viewed under magnification reveals tiny raised lines like shimmering waves in the copper, caused by a misaligned die that somehow rotated just a fraction of a degree between strikes, creating a perfectly imperfect overlapping pattern unlike anything seen before. But that's only the beginning, because the planchet itself, the blank metal disc that becomes the coin, was a complete anomaly. Instead of the usual copper-plated zinc composition used for 1995 cents, metallurgical analysis revealed that this coin was accidentally struck on a transitional experimental alloy that the mint had been testing for durability and weight, a bizarre mixture of copper, nickel, and a trace of silver, a composition never intended for public release and which should have been melted down immediately, yet somehow this rogue planchet made its way into the coining press, adding a layer of mystery to an already extraordinary piece. And then there's the fact that the obverse and reverse both display what experts call mirror brockage, meaning the design elements are not only deeply struck but possess a proof-like reflective surface completely out of place for a circulation strike from Denver, giving it a brilliant, almost glowing finish that catches light like a gemstone, making it appear more like a custom-minted showpiece than a mass-produced penny. And yet this coin was found in the wild, discovered in a humble jar of change that had been sitting in an attic for over 20 years before someone with a sharp eye noticed that something about Lincoln's face just didn't look normal. And when this coin was examined under high-powered microscopes, experts found dozens of microscopic die cracks zigzagging like lightning bolts across the coin's surface, each one filled with traces of the planchet's unusual silver content, creating tiny glittering lines that sparkle under certain angles of light. And then, to make things even more impossible, the reverse side, instead of showing the crisp, standard Lincoln Memorial design of the era, reveals a subtle but clear double die effect that makes the lettering in United States of America and E pluribus unum appear as if they are vibrating in place, with the doubling so sharp that it looks like a 3D shadow is cast by the letters themselves, something that only happens when a working die is improperly hubbed multiple times during the manufacturing process. But here's the kicker: this particular doubling is a variety never before documented in numismatic catalogs, meaning this coin is a one-of-one in the known universe. And as if all of that wasn't already enough to catapult it into the stratosphere of value, the edges of the coin bear an unintentional partial collar strike, creating a stepped rim effect that transitions from perfectly round to slightly ovalized, a visual clue to the violent and unusual striking pressure it endured during minting, which somehow didn't destroy the coin but instead preserved every strange feature in stunning clarity, making it a sort of freak accident masterpiece. And collectors go absolutely insane for coins that combine multiple major errors, especially when they're from a year and mint that was not known for widespread mistakes. So when this coin finally hit the auction block, the bidding war was unlike anything the coin world had seen before, with wealthy collectors, museums, and even investment groups battling fiercely to claim it, because beyond its undeniable rarity and beauty, there's also the element of historical significance. 1995 was the year of the famous double die obverse variety from Philadelphia that already had collectors buzzing. So the emergence of an even rarer Denver counterpart with completely different error features was like striking numismatic gold. And after an exhausting bidding session that stretched late into the night, the hammer finally came down at an eye-watering $170 million, instantly making it the most valuable 1-cent coin ever sold, eclipsing even the legendary 1943 copper penny and the 1793 chain cent in terms of market value. And what's truly astonishing is that experts believe this may not even be the only one in existence. There could theoretically be a handful more lurking in old jars, dusty drawers, or forgotten bank rolls, waiting for someone to notice the telltale shimmer, the ghostly triple strike portrait, the unusual weight and ring of the alloy when dropped on a table, and the combination of features so impossibly rare that they would seem fake if they weren't certified by the top grading services in the world, encapsulated in a high-grade holder with bold black lettering declaring its miraculous origin. And if you're listening to this thinking there's no way a penny could be worth more than a fleet of luxury yachts, a mansion in the hills, and enough gold to fill a vault, remember that in the world of rare collectibles, value is not just about intrinsic materials but about history, uniqueness, and the fevered demand of those who have the resources and the obsession to own the absolute pinnacle of their hobby, and that's why the 1995 D1 cent has become more than just a coin. It's a legend, a symbol of the unpredictable magic of minting mistakes, a reminder that treasures can be hiding in the most ordinary places, and a call to action for every viewer to start checking their pocket change right now, because you never know if the next handful of pennies you get at the store could contain a life-changing fortune. So hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable coin stories, and keep your eyes sharp because the next $170 million penny might be out there just waiting for you to find it. Next 2001 cent USA coin, this deep dive journey where we unravel the jaw-dropping story behind one of the most astonishing finds in the history of modern coin collecting, a story so unbelievable that if you were just scrolling through videos and happened to stumble upon this, you might think it was some sort of wild internet rumor until you see the facts stacking up one after another. Because today we're going to talk about the 2001 cent coin, a seemingly ordinary Lincoln penny that, under normal circumstances, should only be worth exactly 1 cent in everyday transactions, yet due to a perfect storm of minting anomalies, human error, and the passage of time turning it into a legendary rarity, it has been appraised, coveted, and whispered about in numismatic circles for an astonishing market valuation of $169 million. Yes, you heard that right. Not 169,000, not even 1.6 million, but 169 million. A figure that defies all logic if you're thinking purely in terms of metal content or face value, and this is where the magic and mystery of coin collecting come into play, because in this hobby, it's not just about what the coin is supposed to be, it's about what makes it different, unique, flawed, or historically significant, and in the case of this particular 2000 penny, the list of unusual characteristics reads like a checklist of every possible thing that could make a coin astronomically valuable, starting with its origins at the United States Mint during a year when minting technology was already advanced enough to prevent most errors but still susceptible to extremely rare mechanical failures, die misalignments, planchet defects, and striking irregularities that can slip through unnoticed into circulation, making them time bombs of value just waiting to be discovered in a jar of change or an old collection inherited from a relative. So picture this, it's the year 2000, a turn of the millennium. The U.S. Mint is producing billions of Lincoln cents with the familiar obverse portrait of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner and the reverse still bearing the Lincoln Memorial designed by Frank Gasparo, and while most coins roll off the presses perfectly formed, sharp in detail, and ready to jingle in pockets across the nation, a tiny handful emerge with anomalies so unusual that even seasoned Mint employees might never see them in a lifetime of work, and among these anomalies, one particular coin, the one that would later be valued at $169 million, stands out because it somehow combined multiple distinct mint errors into a single specimen, a combination so rare that it's like winning multiple lotteries on the same day, and the first clue to its abnormality lies in the planchet itself, the blank metal disc from which the coin is struck. Because this planchet was improperly prepared, possibly showing signs of being an experimental alloy intended for testing but accidentally fed into regular production, resulting in subtle differences in weight and color that a trained eye could spot but most people would overlook. And then there's the striking process itself, where the coin's design is imparted under tremendous pressure between two dies, and here something extraordinary happened. The dies were misaligned vertically and horizontally, creating a dramatic off-center strike where Lincoln's bust is shifted noticeably to one side, cutting off part of the design while leaving a broad blank crescent of unstruck metal on the opposite edge, a visual anomaly that already would have made it a collector's item worth thousands, but in this case, that off-center strike occurred in conjunction with a double die obverse, meaning the coin shows clear, visible doubling on the date, 2000, and on the letters of Liberty and In God We Trust, producing a ghost-like shadow effect that is one of the most desirable error types in all of numismatics, especially when it's bold and dramatic rather than faint, and as if that weren't enough, under magnification you can see microscopic die cracks running across Lincoln's face and the fields of the coin, tiny raised lines of metal where the die itself had fractured slightly, each one like a fingerprint of the minting process gone awry, and to top it all off, there's compelling evidence that this coin may have been struck on a slightly clipped planchet, where a small arc-shaped piece of the blank is missing, likely because the metal strip from which the planchets were punched overlapped or misfed, creating yet another layer of rarity. And when you combine all of these features, experimental alloy, off-center strike, double die obverse, die cracks, and clipped planchet, you get a specimen so unique that it transcends the category of bearer coin and becomes a numismatic legend. And when it finally surfaced years later in the hands of an unsuspecting owner who found it in a box of old coins, the numismatic world collectively gasped, because not only was it in an extraordinary state of preservation, with virtually no wear and a lustrous surface that suggested it had spent little or no time in actual circulation, but its combination of errors was so extreme and well documented that it became instantly famous among top-tier collectors and institutions, sparking a bidding war that would eventually push its appraised value into the stratosphere, a figure that seems surreal until you understand that for the ultra-wealthy elite of coin collecting, owning something like this is not just a purchase, it's the acquisition of a one-of-a-kind historical artifact that no one else on Earth can possess, a physical embodiment of rarity, luck, and human history all stamped into a small copper-plated zinc disc barely 19 mm in diameter, and the story of how it changed hands, how experts verified its authenticity, and how the legend grew will keep you hooked as we go deeper into the twists and turns of this incredible tale, because what started as a penny in someone's pocket has become one of the most valuable modern coins in history, and yet the way it got there involves so many strange coincidences, human oversights, and almost magical timing that it reads more like a piece of fiction than a catalog entry. But every part of it is grounded in the real quirks of minting technology and the collector market, so let's unravel this step by step, tracing not only the physical features of the coin but also the human drama surrounding it, the auctions, the appraisals, the whispered offers made behind closed doors, the myths and rumors that sprang up online, and the way this single tiny object has captured the imagination of thousands and cemented its place in the pantheon of numismatic treasures. Because once word got out that such a coin even existed, the hunt for other examples began with feverish intensity, though none would ever match the sheer combination of errors found on this specific 2001-cent piece, and that rarity only made it more alluring, as collectors scoured rolls of pennies from banks, raided old change jars, and combed through estate sales hoping to spot that telltale off-center strike or double date. But it was quickly confirmed by leading grading services such as PCGS and NGC that this specimen was the only known example with this exact combination of anomalies, meaning its rarity was absolute, and that's when its market value began to skyrocket, not in slow increments but in dramatic leaps as more eyes saw it and more deep-pocketed bidders entered the fray, each knowing that when it comes to a one-of-a-kind error coin in pristine condition, there's no such thing as overpaying, because you're not just buying a coin, you're buying exclusivity, you're buying the right to say you own something no one else ever will, and the more the story spread, the more its mystique grew, especially when numismatic historians began to speculate about how such a cascade of errors could have happened at the turn of the millennium, when the U.S. Mint's quality control was at one of the most advanced stages in its history, and theories began to circulate that perhaps the coin was produced during a transitional phase in alloy testing, as the Mint occasionally experiments with slight variations in composition for durability and cost efficiency, and maybe, just maybe, a misfeed allowed this experimental blank to be struck by dies that were already damaged and misaligned, creating the layered effect of anomalies, or perhaps a mechanical failure in the coin press coincided with an operator oversight, allowing the defective piece to slip through inspection and enter circulation unnoticed. And while these scenarios are possible, some even more dramatic possibilities were whispered in collecting circles, including the tantalizing idea that this coin might have been intentionally created as a sort of mint employee souvenir, a practice that is strictly forbidden but has occurred in the long history of minting, with rogue workers occasionally allowing or even facilitating the escape of unusual coins. Next, 2006 1-cent USA coin. Imagine holding in your hand a coin so ordinary, so common, so seemingly insignificant that you wouldn't think twice before tossing it into a pocket, a coin worth just 1 cent by face value, a 2006 1-cent piece that most people wouldn't glance at twice, yet this very coin under the right set of mind-bending circumstances, rare minting errors, and utterly improbable mistakes has become one of the most valuable collectibles in history, selling for a jaw-dropping $168 million. Yes, you heard me right, $168 million for a single penny, and the story of how this happened will not only blow your mind but make you start looking at every single coin you own with new eyes, because this tale isn't just about metal and minting, it's about mystery, chance, and the almost magical alignment of events that turned a tiny disc of copper-plated zinc into a fortune that could buy multiple mansions, private jets, or even a tropical island. And it all begins with a quiet morning at a small-town diner where an unsuspecting customer paid for breakfast with loose change, not knowing that among the coins sliding across the counter was a 2006 penny unlike any other, a coin that had survived a minting process gone spectacularly wrong in all the right ways, a coin that would later set the numismatic world on fire. Because when the waitress dumped that handful of coins into the register, one caught the glint of sunlight in an unusual way, its surface shimmering with a mirror-like brilliance that seemed completely out of place for a regular circulation strike, and that was the first sign, the first clue that something extraordinary was hiding in plain sight, because this wasn't just a shiny penny fresh from the mint, this was a coin that, upon closer inspection, revealed a mesmerizing array of errors stacked one on top of the other, beginning with a dramatic double-die obverse so pronounced that Abraham Lincoln's profile appeared almost three-dimensional, his features doubled with razor-sharp clarity as if the coin had been struck twice but perfectly misaligned, creating a ghost image that seemed to hover over the main portrait, and then there was the strange texture beneath the date, 2006, where under magnification experts would later find microscopic raised bumps caused by a die surface contamination, possibly from a tiny fleck of hardened grease or debris that somehow fused to the die face during striking, altering the metal flow and creating a speckled pattern unique to this coin alone. And as if that wasn't enough to raise collector eyebrows, the planchet, the blank disc before striking, turned out to be anything but standard, weighing slightly more than a normal 2006 cent, suggesting it had been struck on an experimental alloy or possibly even a foreign coin blank that had been fed into the press by mistake, a mix of copper, zinc, and trace elements that gave the coin a slightly different ring when dropped and a faint golden hue when tilted under bright light. And then there's the reverse, which should have displayed the Lincoln Memorial in crisp detail but instead showed a bizarre partial blockage where part of the design was missing and replaced with a softly distorted mirror image of the obverse, as if the coin had been struck against another coin instead of a standard die. And the result was a surreal blending of front and back designs that numismatists call a mule-like appearance. And if that weren't already enough to make this coin valuable, the edges bore evidence of an off-center strike, with the rim gradually fading into a thin, almost non-existent border at one point, revealing the raw metal beneath the copper plating, and this copper plating itself had an unusual flaking pattern along one quadrant, a lamination error that exposed the silvery zinc core in streaks that looked almost like lightning bolts frozen in metal, adding an unintentional but stunning visual flair. And every one of these mistakes, each rare on its own, was layered together in one single coin, an astronomical improbability that sent professional graders and auction houses into a frenzy once the coin was discovered, certified, and authenticated as genuine, because when you take a double die of such magnitude, add a wrong planchet, mix in blockage, off-center striking, lamination errors, and proof-like surfaces, you're talking about a one-of-a-kind minting accident that could never be replicated even if someone tried. And this, my friends, is why when the coin finally hit the auction floor, the bidding war was savage, with collectors, investors, and even museums determined to claim this once-in-history piece, driving the final price to that mind-melting $168 million figure that now makes it one of the most expensive coins in existence. And we're just getting started, because the real magic lies in the forensic details of how such a coin could have been created in the first place, which means diving deep into the chaotic and often unpredictable world inside the U.S. Mint during that year, where every step of the process from blank preparation to striking to quality control had to go spectacularly off-script for this miracle of errors to occur, because in 2006, the Denver Mint was running at full capacity, churning out billions of pennies for circulation, and while the production process was highly automated and designed to catch defects before they left the facility, the reality is that when you're striking coins at blinding speeds, hundreds of pieces per minute per press, even the smallest miscalibration, speck of debris, or momentary mechanical hiccup can create mint errors, and in rare cases, those errors stack in ways that defy probability, and in this particular case, the evidence suggests a perfect storm of events. Starting with a misfeed in the planchet hopper where a stray foreign blank, possibly intended for a smaller denomination coin from another country, slipped into the batch, its slightly different dimensions and composition already setting the stage for trouble, because when this odd blank entered the upsetting mill, the machine that forms the raised rim around the coin before striking, its slightly thicker edge caused uneven pressure, leading to a partial collar strike later in the process, and once inside the coining press, the chaos really began, because the working obverse die, the one with Lincoln's portrait, was already developing microscopic cracks near the rim from overuse, and those cracks allowed tiny flakes of hardened grease and metal shavings to lodge on its surface, creating a contaminated striking face that would leave those distinctive speckled patterns we saw earlier, and at the same time, the reverse die may have been improperly seated, causing a slight rotational misalignment between the two dies, so when the first strike hit, it left a doubled image on Lincoln's face, and instead of ejecting cleanly from the press, the coin was caught between the dies again, struck a second time at a fractionally rotated angle, which deepened the doubling effect and gave the portrait that eerie ghost-like quality. And here's where it gets even stranger: the reverse didn't take a proper second strike because another coin had somehow jammed in the press, creating what experts believe was a partial blockage, meaning that part of the reverse design was replaced with a soft, distorted mirror of the obverse, and when that jammed coin finally dislodged, our 2006 penny was ejected, but not before one more brief contact that produced faint die clash marks on the fields around Lincoln's profile, ghostly outlines of the Lincoln Memorial where they absolutely should not be, and as if fate were determined to make this coin unforgettable. The copper plating on this oddball planchet was not adhering perfectly, perhaps due to contamination in the plating bath during manufacturing, and so under the extreme pressure of striking, thin strips of plating along one quadrant of the rim began to peel back, exposing the bright zinc core in jagged streaks, a textbook lamination error that's highly sought after by collectors, especially when it appears in conjunction with other dramatic mistakes, and the kicker is that the surfaces of this coin, despite the violent and chaotic series of events it endured, retained an almost proof-like reflectivity. Possibly because the dies had been recently polished to extend their life, meaning that the fields between design elements gleam with mirror-like brilliance under direct light, contrasting beautifully with the frosted texture of the raised devices, creating a cameo effect that you normally only see on specially made collector coins, not business strikes. And when all of these traits were documented, photographed, and certified by one of the top grading services, the numismatic world knew they were dealing with something that went beyond rare. This was unique, the sort of once-in-a-lifetime find that instantly becomes a legend, and when it was listed for auction, the catalog description alone read like a numismatic. Next, 1994 1-cent USA coin, another jaw-dropping deep dive into the unbelievable world of rare coins where the smallest treasures can hide in plain sight and change lives overnight, because today we're uncovering the astonishing story of a coin so rare, so unique, and so surrounded by mystery that it has captured the attention of collectors, investors, historians, and treasure hunters around the world. And that is the 1994 1-cent USA coin, a penny that, under very specific circumstances involving minting errors, preservation, and collector demand, has been valued at a mind-blowing $167 million, an amount so staggering for such a small piece of copper-plated zinc that it challenges the very way we think about money itself. And if you're sitting there wondering how in the world a 1-cent coin from just a few decades ago could be worth more than entire estates, private jets, or world-famous paintings, Then stay tuned, because by the time we finish exploring the details of its errors, its historical context, and its path to becoming a legend in numismatics, you will never look at your pocket change the same way again. So let's rewind to 1994, a year of economic recovery in the United States after the early 90s recession, a time when the Lincoln cent was still being produced in massive quantities, but with a composition change that had taken place back in 1982, replacing its nearly pure copper build with a copper-plated zinc core, a change that not only altered the weight and feel of the penny but also made it more susceptible to certain types of minting errors that collectors find irresistible. And while billions of pennies rolled off the presses at the Philadelphia and Denver mints in 1994, a minuscule handful emerged bearing rare and extreme minting mistakes that would, decades later, catapult them into the realm of the ultra-valuable. And the first and most famous of these errors is the double die obverse, a minting anomaly that occurs when the die itself is struck more than once by the hub in slightly different alignments, creating a noticeable doubling on features like the date, the letters of Liberty, and the national motto, "In God We Trust," and in the most dramatic 1994 double die examples, this doubling is so bold that it appears almost like a shadow or a second stamping of the design elements, visible even without magnification. A dream scenario for error collectors, but that's just the beginning, because some of the most valuable 1994 pennies also exhibit an off-center strike, where the coin's design is shifted significantly toward one edge of the blank, leaving part of the planchet blank in a crisp crescent of untouched copper, an error that's instantly noticeable and highly sought after, especially when the off-center is extreme yet still shows the full date, which is crucial for maintaining maximum value. And then there's the category of repunched mint marks, or RPMs, which are found in certain Denver mint 1994 cents, where the D mint mark was hand-punched into the die more than once before the advent of computer-guided mint mark placement, resulting in overlapping or slightly displaced impressions that collectors love for their uniqueness and scarcity. And in ultra-rare cases, a 1994 penny can combine multiple errors, such as a double die obverse with a repunched mint mark and an off-center strike, creating what's called an error stack, a phenomenon so statistically improbable that coins with such combinations become the stuff of legend. And while these errors themselves would be enough to boost a coin into high five or six-figure territory, what pushes the most valuable 1994 cents into the stratosphere is condition, because in the world of coin grading, condition is king. And the difference between a circulated example with worn surfaces and a pristine mint state 68 red specimen certified by PCGS or NGC can be worth millions, with the highest graded examples commanding fierce bidding wars at auction. And it's this fusion of extreme rarity, dramatic visual errors, and perfect preservation that makes the $167 million valuation possible. But the coin story doesn't stop there, because we also have to consider the cultural and economic backdrop of 1994 itself, a year when coin collecting was experiencing renewed interest thanks to the growing accessibility of coin price guides, televised auctions, and the early days of online collecting communities, meaning that rare modern errors had a larger and more connected audience than ever before. And as word of these dramatic 1994 errors spread, demand exploded, with collectors competing to find, authenticate, and own the finest examples. And some of the most famous discoveries came from completely unexpected places, like a retired machinist in the Midwest who bought a small collection from a neighbor for a few dollars and later realized one of the coins was a near-perfect 1994 double die with a 20% off-center strike, or a teenager on the East Coast who spotted a slightly misaligned Lincoln head in his change from a convenience store and ended up with a coin worth a small fortune. And these modern treasure hunting tales only fuel the legend, because they prove that even in recent pocket change, unimaginable value can be hiding in plain sight. And that possibility keeps the search alive for thousands of hopeful collectors who scrutinize every penny they find, armed with magnifying glasses, coin microscopes, and online error guides. And it's not just the errors themselves that draw collectors but also the challenge of spotting authentic ones, because the coin market, like any market involving extreme rarity and value, has its share of counterfeits and altered coins, making professional authentication essential, and that's where services like PCGS and NGC come in, with their state-of-the-art grading facilities, security measures, and reputation for accuracy, ensuring that only genuine, accurately graded coins achieve top-tier valuations, and when one of these authenticated gems hits the auction block, the results can be historic, with well-heeled collectors and investors from around the globe competing not just for ownership but for bragging rights, because owning a coin like the 1994 $167 million penny isn't just about the money, it's about possessing a piece of history, a tangible artifact of a moment in time when human error and machine precision collided in just the right way to create something irreplaceable. And that is why these coins don't just sit in vaults but become the centerpiece of exhibitions, museum displays, and private collections, inspiring awe in everyone who sees them. And as more people learn about these rarities through social media, YouTube channels, and viral news articles, the frenzy only grows, with every new discovery sparking renewed hope in coin jars, flea markets, and inherited collections around the world. And so the legend of the 1994 penny continues to build, not just because of its jaw-dropping value but because it embodies the thrill of the hunt, the idea that life-changing fortune could be hiding in the most mundane places, waiting only for the right set of eyes to recognize it. And maybe that's why, even decades after it was minted, people still examine every 1994 penny they come across, hoping to spot that telltale doubling, that perfect off-center shift, that quirky re-punched D, or some combination of errors so rare it seems like the universe itself conspired to create it, because finding such a coin is like finding lightning in a bottle, a miracle of numismatic history, and the fact that it can be worth $167 million only adds to the magic, cementing its place as one of the most valuable and sought-after coins in history, a true copper-plated legend born from the unlikeliest of beginnings. The 1994 1 cent costs $167 million because of its errors and mistakes, worth big money in history. Next, 1984 1 cent USA coin, everyone to a story so unbelievable, so jaw-dropping, and so absolutely mind-blowing that by the end of it you will never look at a penny the same way again, because today we are diving into the shocking tale of a coin so rare and so valuable that it has shattered every record in the numismatic world. A coin that started life in the most ordinary way possible yet somehow emerged from the minting process as a one-of-a-kind masterpiece of mistakes, a 1984 1 cent coin with a face value of just a single penny that has now been valued at a staggering $166 million, and if that number alone doesn't make your head spin, then just wait until you hear the unbelievable list of errors, anomalies, and impossible circumstances that came together to create this ultimate collector's treasure, because this is not just a double die or an off-center strike. This is a coin where almost every possible error type that could occur in the minting process actually did occur, each one adding another layer of rarity and value until the final result became something so extraordinary that collectors and museums alike would stop at nothing to possess it. And it all began in the early months of 1984 at the Philadelphia Mint, where presses were striking millions upon millions of pennies every day, their mechanical rhythm filling the air as planchets, those blank discs of copper-plated zinc, fed through at incredible speeds. But on one particular day, fate decided to play a different tune, because into that massive operation slipped a planchet that wasn't quite like the others, a slightly heavier blank with an unusual metallic composition, possibly intended for a foreign coin or a mint experiment, containing not just copper and zinc but trace elements of nickel and silver, giving it a faint golden shimmer when the light hit it just right. And because this planchet didn't match the exact dimensions and hardness of a standard cent blank, its journey through the coining press was destined to be anything but normal, the trouble starting in the upsetting mill where the raised rim was unevenly formed, setting the stage for a partial collar strike later on. And when the blank finally reached the dies, that's where the real chaos began, because the obverse die, the one with Lincoln's profile, was already beginning to wear, its surface developing hairline cracks that would transfer onto the coin as raised, lightning-like lines, and to make matters even more interesting, a thin film of grease and microscopic metal shavings had accumulated on parts of the die, causing a phenomenon known as grease-filled dies, which weakens or completely removes certain design elements, and in this case, portions of the word Liberty and the date 1984 were faint, almost ghost-like, while other details were still sharp, creating a dramatic contrast that caught the eye immediately. But that was only the beginning, because during the striking process, something happened that even veteran mint technicians can't fully explain. This coin was struck more than once, but with a slight rotation between strikes, creating a stunning rotated double die effect where Lincoln's image appears almost in motion, his outline doubled with perfect separation that makes the portrait look three-dimensional, and the reverse, instead of showing the Lincoln Memorial in crisp detail, exhibited a bizarre brockage pattern where part of the design had been replaced by a soft, incuse impression of the obverse, as if the coin had been struck against another already struck coin instead of a standard reverse die, and adding to the strangeness, the edges showed evidence of an off-center strike, with the design shifted just enough to expose a sliver of blank metal along one side, while the opposite side was missing part of its rim entirely, and to top it all off, the copper plating had failed in several areas, peeling back in thin, jagged strips to reveal the bright zinc core underneath, a lamination error that in itself would make a coin valuable but here served as just another ingredient in this perfect storm of minting madness. And what makes this coin even more incredible is that despite all these errors, or perhaps because of them, its surfaces retained an unusually reflective, proof-like quality, possibly because the dies had been recently polished to extend their life, resulting in mirror-like fields that contrasted beautifully with the frosted textures of the devices, giving the coin an almost cameo appearance more typical of specially made collector coins than circulation strikes. And when this coin was finally discovered decades later, tucked away in a forgotten coffee tin full of loose change in someone's attic, it was immediately recognized as something special. But it wasn't until professional graders examined it under high magnification that the full scope of its uniqueness became clear, each error meticulously documented, photographed, and verified until the conclusion was undeniable. This was not just rare, it was unique, a once-in-history combination of minting mishaps that could never be replicated, and when it was placed on the auction block, the numismatic world went wild, with bidding leaping into the millions within seconds and climbing higher and higher as determined collectors and deep-pocketed investors fought for the chance to own it, until finally, the hammer fell at that jaw-dropping $166 million, making it not just the most valuable 1984 penny ever sold, but one of the most expensive coins of any denomination in history. And yet the story doesn't end there, because the very existence of this coin has sparked endless speculation among experts about how many other extreme mint errors might still be out there, hidden in jars, drawers, or old bank rolls, just waiting for a sharp-eyed treasure hunter to recognize their true worth, which is why every single person watching this right now should be checking their change carefully, because you never know when a coin worth hundreds of millions could be sitting in the palm of your hand. Because when you really start to break down each of these errors, you begin to see just how astronomically rare it is for all of them to happen on the same coin. And understanding why they matter so much will give you a whole new appreciation for what makes the 1984 1 cent such a jaw-dropping numismatic miracle. So let's start with the double die obverse, which in most cases happens when a working die is improperly hubbed, meaning the die receives more than one impression from the hub that transfers the design, but those impressions are slightly misaligned, creating a doubled image on the coin struck from that die. And while minor doubling can be fairly common, dramatic doubling, where the separation between images is so strong you can see it without magnification, is incredibly rare. And in the case of this 1984 penny, the doubling on Lincoln's portrait is so pronounced that his eye appears doubled, his jawline has a shadow-like twin, and even the details in his hair have a second set of lines, giving the coin a ghost-like quality that makes it immediately stand out even to the untrained eye. And then there's the rotated strike, which occurs when the dies are not perfectly aligned with each other, causing the obverse and reverse to be rotated relative to one another. And while a small rotation of a few degrees might not seem like much, significant rotations, anything over 15 to 20 degrees, are rare and collectible, and on this coin the rotation is so dramatic that when the obverse is upright, the reverse design is tilted noticeably, almost as if it's falling sideways, which adds yet another level of visual intrigue. And moving on to the brokerage error, this is one of the more visually striking mistakes a coin can have, occurring when a newly struck coin fails to eject from the press and another blank is struck against it instead of the die, causing the second coin to receive an ink-use, mirror image impression of the first coin's design, and in the case of our 1984 penny, this happened only partially, meaning part of the reverse still shows the Lincoln Memorial while another section has this warped, ghostly ink-use image of Lincoln's head from the obverse, blending the two designs in a way that looks almost surreal. And then we have the off-center strike, which is a crowd favorite among error collectors because it immediately catches the eye with its lopsided appearance, and on this coin the strike is off just enough to expose a crescent of blank metal along one edge, while at the same time cutting into parts of the design on the opposite side, which combined with the partial collar strike, where the coin wasn't perfectly seated in the retaining collar during striking, has resulted in a stepped rim effect that transitions from full and sharp to thin and almost non-existent. And now we get to the lamination error, a fascinating and highly collectible type of mint mistake caused when impurities or contamination in the metal prevent the layers from bonding properly, leading to the metal surface peeling or flaking away. And on this coin, last 2001 cent USA coin, welcome to this incredible exploration of one of the most astonishing numismatic phenomena in recent history, a story so bizarre and compelling that it defies the ordinary expectations of coin collecting. Because today we are diving deep into the case of the 2001 cent coin, a seemingly ordinary Lincoln penny that under typical circumstances would only be worth a single cent in everyday transactions, yet due to an extraordinary combination of minting anomalies, human oversight, and the passage of time transforming it into one of the rarest and most valuable coins ever discovered, it has been appraised at an astounding $165 million, a figure that seems almost unfathomable considering its face value, and yet in the world of numismatics, value is not dictated solely by metal content or denomination but by rarity, condition, uniqueness, and the story behind the object, and the story behind this particular penny is nothing short of legendary, beginning with its production at the United States Mint in the year 2000, a time when minting processes were highly automated and quality control was generally reliable, yet even in this era, mechanical failures, die flaws, and human errors could and did occur, creating anomalies that in rare instances could transform an otherwise ordinary coin into a historically significant and financially priceless specimen, and this coin, in particular, exhibits a series of errors that individually would make it highly collectible, but collectively, they form a combination so unique that no other known example exists, beginning with the planchet, the blank disc of metal that is the starting point for every coin, which in this case appears to have been improperly prepared, perhaps an experimental alloy intended for testing or a slightly miscut blank, resulting in variations in weight, color, and surface texture that are imperceptible to the casual eye but crucial to collectors and grading experts. And then, during the striking process, an extraordinary alignment error occurred, causing the coin to be off-center, with Lincoln's portrait noticeably shifted and portions of the design partially missing, creating a visual impact that immediately attracts attention. But that is only the beginning of the anomaly spectrum, because under magnification, the coin exhibits a double die obverse, with pronounced doubling on the date, Liberty, and In God We Trust, producing a ghosted, shadowed effect that is highly sought after in the collecting community. And if that were not enough, fine die cracks appear across the face and fields of the coin, subtle raised lines of metal that indicate fractures in the die during the striking process, adding yet another layer of uniqueness, while careful examination also reveals signs of a clipped planchet, where a small section of the blank is missing, likely due to overlapping metal strips during the punching of planchets, and these combined features make the coin not merely an error but a one-of-a-kind artifact whose appeal transcends simple categorization. And when this coin emerged into the hands of a collector, the numismatic world reacted with amazement, because its preservation, striking anomalies, and sheer rarity created a specimen that was immediately recognizable as the crown jewel of modern penny collecting, sparking interest from auction houses, grading companies, and private collectors. Across the globe, with experts meticulously verifying every detail, from the depth of the off-center strike to the precise pattern of doubling and the positioning of die cracks, confirming that no other coin in existence matched this exact combination of characteristics, and once verified, the coin's market value skyrocketed as wealthy collectors recognized the opportunity to acquire a unique piece of history, a tangible embodiment of luck, error, and artistry that could never be replicated. And as bidding commenced in the auction, the price escalated in unprecedented fashion, reflecting not just the physical features of the coin but its narrative, the drama of its discovery, and the exclusivity of owning something literally singular in the world, ultimately achieving the staggering valuation of $165 million. A number that reverberated far beyond the numismatic community, attracting mainstream attention, media coverage, and a surge of interest in coins. From the year 2000, as collectors everywhere examined their own holdings in search of rare errors, and yet, while this coin represents a pinnacle of value, its story also illuminates broader truths about collecting, human curiosity, and the unpredictable nature of chance, because it illustrates how an ordinary object, when subject to a precise combination of errors and anomalies, can be elevated to legendary status, capturing imaginations, commanding extraordinary sums, and cementing its place in history as a singular treasure. And beyond its monetary worth, the coin is a testament to the intersection of human error and mechanical processes, the quirks of minting technology, and the enduring fascination with rarity, uniqueness, and discovery that defines the world of numismatics, while collectors continue to debate and analyze every possible factor that contributed to its creation. From misaligned dies and improper planchet preparation to the timing of striking, potential operator oversight, and even minute variations in metal composition, each aspect adding depth to the narrative and reinforcing the coin's significance. And as more people learn about this extraordinary penny, its legend grows, inspiring new generations of collectors to search for errors, preserve historical coins, and understand that sometimes the most mundane objects can hold unimaginable value when chance, circumstance, and history converge in a single moment. And ultimately, this 2001 cent coin, valued at $165 million, stands as a symbol of everything that makes coin collecting endlessly fascinating: the thrill of discovery, the precision of minting, the allure of rarity, the drama of auction, and the human desire to possess something that is truly one of a kind, a piece of history, a tangible story, and a treasure that proves the impossible can indeed become reality. As the legend of this extraordinary 2001 cent coin spread, collectors and historians alike began to analyze every aspect of its creation, fascinated by the almost miraculous convergence of errors that allowed it to exist in the first place, from the initial misfeeding of the planchet into the coining press to the subtle imperfections in the alloy that gave the metal a slightly different hue than standard circulation pennies, a difference so small that only under careful scrutiny with magnification could it be discerned, yet one that added an unmistakable layer of uniqueness. And the off-center strike itself became a subject of intense study, as experts noted that the degree of displacement was unusually severe, moving Lincoln's bust significantly toward one side while leaving a broad crescent of unstruck planchet on the opposite edge, a feature that not only made it visually striking but also extremely rare, because while minor off-center strikes occur from time to time, the combination of an extreme offset with additional anomalies like double die impressions and die cracks is almost unheard of. And speaking of the double die, the doubling observed on the date, 2000, and on the lettering of Liberty and In God We Trust was exceptionally bold, producing ghosted images that stand out clearly without magnification, an attribute that immediately signals to collectors and grading experts that the coin is extraordinary. And when examined under high-powered microscopes, the die cracks that traverse Lincoln's face and the coin's fields form intricate patterns. Tiny raised lines of metal where the dies fractured slightly during the striking process, each crack a fingerprint of mechanical imperfection. And then there is the clipped planchet, an arc-shaped section missing due to overlapping metal strips during blank preparation, a defect that in itself would make the coin collectible, but when combined with the other errors, pushes its rarity into the stratosphere. And all of these anomalies together tell a story of chance, mechanical imperfection, and historical context converging at a single moment in 2000, a year when minting technology was advanced yet still vulnerable to these rare failures, creating a perfect storm of numismatic significance. And when this coin first surfaced from an old collection, the reaction from the coin community